So, it's been about 6 years since I published this thing. Uh, Nice little book called Majesty and Monotony that basically summarized everything that I have learned, both academically, professionally, and personally in my life up till that point, which isn't very long. It's only 2 decades, a little over 2 decades. But they shoved a lot of knowledge in my head, and I had to reconcile that and compile it into some sort of manuscript just to keep myself sane. And I had started a video series where I was going to summarize uh, each of the chapters just briefly uh, to give people a better idea of what they would expect if they were to go through and actually read the book. And at the time, I had a laptop. I uh, had no idea how to really make or record videos. I still don't. Uh, so apologies for that. But what I can say is that uh, I have had plenty of time to sit and meditate on what I was going to do when I was ready to start making videos again. If you're wondering why it took me so long to start making videos again, it's because my laptop that I was using at the time crashed. I had to replace it with a little cheap one that wasn't quite capable of taking the same quality of videos. Not that these are especially high quality, but even so, I was pretty unable to make quality videos at all, and I wanted to make sure that I could at least hold a similar standard to the ones that I had previously made. Now I have a much better laptop, and so I'm going to finish off a quick summary of each chapter. And where I last left off, I believe, was chapter 2, which is all about what and who you are. And of course, if you're listening to this, the answer to that should be pretty obvious. You're a human, I presume, probably Homo sapien. We'll see in a couple 100,000 years who gets access to this video, if anyone. But for now, I'm going with human. But what does that mean? That is a little bit more nuanced and a several billion year old story uh, in the making. So, in this chapter, I try to tackle this question of who you are from a couple of different, mostly scientific perspectives. The first three chapters are almost exclusively science based, and after that, the book sort of begins to gradually lean more into a more philosophical type of tone. For this chapter, though, I specifically discuss human beings from perspectives of genetics and neuroscience, and then, of course, my particular domain of expertise, mostly in the field of physics, specifically particle physics, but they all sort of gradually bleed into one another. Starting off from basic particles, those coalesce to form molecules, such as DNA, goes into genetics, and more complex molecules form proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, right? The things that we eat, those coalesce, form into cells. And typically we associate one type or one umbrella term of cell for what we consider to be who we are as humans. That being the nervous system. So your typical nerve cells, your glial cells, all of those and how they interact through electromagnetism to communicate with one another, sort of like um, a colony of ants or a hive of bees communicate with one another to essentially create one superorganism that is a human being. And so I kind of have a lot of fun with this one, breaking down um, each different subgenre of science and trying to put them together into one coherent sort of narrative of what it means to be human. I also want to make it clear that I don't attempt to give a solid answer to any of these very deep questions anywhere throughout this chapter or, for that matter, the rest of the book. Really, within the day, the goal of this first manuscript that I wrote was, as I said earlier, to sort of help me uh, reconcile information that I had learned up till that point and put it all into one place and sort of try and make sense of it. But in addition to that, it was also primarily to help other people ask questions, to evoke some critical thinking for other people, and sort of tackle with these deep questions from their point of view, asking deep questions, and basically just getting people to think more heavily about their place in the universe. And I don't care what conclusions you come to. Uh, Everyone's going to have a different perspective, but with a little bit more knowledge and more facts, we can hopefully get a more well-rounded perspective on where we stand in the grand scheme of things. And that's all I intended for. It's also probably one of the last chapters where I will actually use real mathematics. Nothing heavy, but actual equations uh, that mostly relate to physics. But um, if you know anything about the famous equation E equals mc squared, I kind of have a larger section on that and how that relates to um, what it means to be human as well, which some of you might find interesting. And I'll end with this. Uh, One thing that I mentioned in the preface of the book is that you don't have to read it in order. You actually can skip chapters. I wrote it intentionally so that way you can look at the table of contents, you can pick out a chapter that seems interesting or appealing to you, and you can just sort of sift through and skip whatever parts you choose. So you can uh, go through one chapter, and that even applies on micro scale as well. It's fairly dense. I wasn't aware of the idea of spacing out my paragraphs more when I first wrote the book. Probably if I make a new edition, I'll amend that. But the book's very compact. There's a lot of type pages, and it can look like the paragraphs are very long. And so you can almost look at each paragraph as its own sort of miniature chapter, for lack of a better term. So potentially you could even skip through um, paragraphs and just pick out the ones that are um, most enthralling to you personally. Because the book is intended for a wide audience. And not everyone's going to be interested in every single topic the same way that I am, obviously. Maybe you're especially interested in agriculture. Maybe you're especially interested in science or history or mathematics, and you don't care about other subjects. That's fine. Then there's still hopefully something in the book that you can take away and hopefully get a wider perspective from. And that's all. That's all I intended for. And hopefully it's kind of fun too, on top of that. So that's chapter 2 of Majesty and Monotony. For chapter 3, I'll be discussing the topic of where you are, uh, where being in relation to the rest of the cosmos. So on a large scale, every single human being on this little speck of dust planet is essentially in the same place. So no matter where you are on Earth or even in the solar system, we're all essentially in the same place from the perspective of how I wrote the book. So look forward to that. And if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, kudos, feel free to share those in whatever comment section this video happens to be attached to. And I'll look forward to sharing more in the next video. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.